welcome to this explainer. So right now we're watching a really fragile month-old ceasefire in the Middle East totally teetering on the edge of collapse. And honestly, it is sending some massive geopolitical shockwaves right across the globe. We're jumping straight into the thick of it today, because over the weekend, this Iran war ceasefire was seriously put to the test. I mean, we saw Kuwait and the UAE actually repelling these fiery drone attacks. A commercial cargo ship literally caught fire. And now, well, global markets are suddenly hovering right on the brink. The whole world is basically holding its breath, just waiting to see what happens next. To figure out how we get from isolated drone strikes to a massive global standoff, we'll break it down like this. First up, ceasefire under fire. Then blockades and bottlenecks. After that, the nuclear sticking point. And finally, mediation versus escalation. Okay, part 1, ceasefire under fire, drones and ships ablaze. Let's look at the immediate sparks that are testing this shaky pause in fighting. A pause that, by the way, the Trump administration insists is still actually in effect. Just look at the sheer chaos of this weekend's timeline. It escalated so incredibly fast. On Friday, the U.S. strikes 2 Iranian oil tankers. Fast forward to Sunday morning, and you've got hostile drones breaching Kuwait's airspace. Then, by Sunday afternoon, the UAE is shooting down 2 more drones, and a commercial ship catches fire just off the coast of Qatar. That is a highly concentrated burst of violence for what's supposed to be a ceasefire, right? To really grasp these aerial incidents, we have to zoom out a bit and look at the backdrop. Since this whole conflict kicked off back on February 28th with joint U.S. and Israel strikes, Iran and its allied groups have leaned heavily on a massive, highly capable drone fleet. We're talking hundreds of strikes so far. So, while nobody officially claimed responsibility for that cargo ship fire off Doha, the UAE explicitly pointing the finger at Iran for Sunday's downed drones really highlights this persistent, lingering threat from above. Moving right along to part 2, blockades and bottlenecks, choking the Gulf. The conflict definitely isn't just in the air, it's building into a massive economic chokehold affecting everyone. Out on the water, it's like a game of high-stakes tug-of-war with dueling blockades. On one side, you have Iran restricting traffic through the incredibly strategic Strait of Hormuz. And on the flip side, the U.S. is enforcing a really strict blockade on Iranian ports. This tit-for-tat naval conflict is severely strangling the global flow of oil. For example, the U.S. actually says those Friday strikes on the Iranian tankers happened specifically because those vessels were trying to breach their blockade. And this matters to every single one of us. A blocked strait doesn't just mean a few stuck ships. It completely rattles world markets and spikes fuel prices right at your local pump. This vital waterway has been essentially paralyzed since late February, creating this massive economic ripple effect. And just adding fuel to the fire here, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy came out Sunday with a stark warning. Any further attacks on their vessels will be met with a heavy assault on U.S. bases. All right, part 3, the nuclear sticking point, the core of the standoff. Beyond the naval clashes and the economics, there is a core nuclear issue that is totally freezing diplomatic negotiations. The number you absolutely need to remember here is 440. It's probably the single most crucial piece of this entire geopolitical puzzle. According to the UN Nuclear Agency, Iran currently possesses over 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. Let's put that into perspective for a second. We're talking about roughly 970 pounds of uranium enriched up to 60% purity. In the nuclear world, that level of purity is just a very short technical step away from actual weapons-grade material. This massive stockpile, which is mostly housed over at the Isfahan nuclear complex, is essentially the ultimate hurdle standing in the way of peace right now. And the tension surrounding this stockpile is absolutely palpable. Iranian military spokesman Brigadier General Akraminia told state media that their forces are on full readiness. He actually said, "We considered it possible that they might intend to steal it through infiltration operations or heliborne operations." It is a wildly sensitive target, especially when you remember the Isfahan facility was already bombarded during last year's 12-day war and again during the current clashes. Which brings us to our final section, mediation versus escalation, a diplomatic tightrope. Let's look at the High-Wire Act balancing the region's entire future. We are basically watching 2 entirely different realities collide right now. On one hand, you have severe threats of renewed full-scale military escalation. The Revolutionary Guard is threatening heavy assaults, and U.S. President Donald Trump is reiterating threats to resume full-scale bombing if an agreement isn't reached. But directly countering all that fiery rhetoric is actual diplomacy. There's a U.S. proposal on the table right now to end the war, reopen the strait, and roll back that nuclear program, all while Pakistan and Qatar are working as active mediators. So, despite the really intense military posturing we saw over the weekend, diplomatic channels are fighting tooth and nail to stay open. Washington is currently waiting on Iran's response to that New Deal proposal. Meanwhile, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani are in direct communication, urgently coordinating their mediation efforts to somehow keep this fragile ceasefire alive. I want to leave you with this final thought for our explainer today. As drones continue to breach airspace and blockades choke the Gulf, which force is ultimately going to dictate our future here? Will diplomatic mediation actually manage to secure the ceasefire? Or are the nuclear standoff and naval blockades going to drag the world right back into full-scale war? It's an incredibly complex puzzle, but hopefully you've got a much clearer picture of the pieces on the board right now. Thank you so much for learning with me today.